Welcome to the House of Fi. At the House of Fi, we inspire and encourage families of all shapes and demographics to achieve financial independence. Here, we teach you to become debt-free, build wealth, and increase your income. We also share inspiring stories of others on the road to Fi, others who have made it to Fi, as well as some of our own perspective about this journey. If you're a family on the road to financial independence, we want you to know that financial independence is for everyone. We're glad you're here. Welcome back, House of Fi family. And if you are new here, welcome to our house. My name is Wendy, and I am one of your co-hosts. My better half, who is usually with me on the show, as you know, it is football season, and I am currently a football widow, so he will not be joining us today, but hopefully he'll be back next week and definitely on the Friday show. I am super, super excited to be talking with today's guest, Vicki Van Essen. I've been wanting to talk with a mom and a parent who is traveling full-time with children for a really long time because it's absolutely on our dream list to do. And I know that there's other parents out there who just want to know, how on earth do you do this and raise children? And so when I found Vicki, I'm like, please come on. And I'm so glad she was super willing to do that. So Vicki, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm super excited too. Like I said, this is like, for me, this is like, oh my gosh, this is like the dream life. Has it been a dream? Like, has it been what you expected it to be?
Yes, I think overall it definitely has been. We've definitely worked to make this happen the way we were kind of dreaming it would be. But at the end of the day, as is always the case with life, you do get used to it and there are challenges, but overall it's been an awesome year so far.
Wow. And so what made you decide that this was something that you wanted to do with your family?
It's not something that came all at once. It's sort of an idea that developed over time. So I was working as a nurse midwife and also working another side job as an RN at the time that I was pregnant with my second child. And in my mind, I had thought that by the time I had that baby, I would have some idea of what I wanted to do with my future that would not involve working as much as I had been. And he was born and I was on maternity leave and I went back to work and I realized I was kind of still doing the same thing I was doing before and nothing had really changed. While I was on my maternity leave, we went to Germany for a month to visit family there. And my husband and I were both really excited about being there. We really enjoyed what seemed like a more relaxed pace, a little bit of a slower way of life, really beautiful scenery. And so we started thinking about potentially moving to Germany. My husband had looked into a bunch of different jobs out here. Nothing really panned out. And it really required us to continue sort of brainstorming how we were going to make that happen. And so instead of focusing on just needing a job abroad, which is one path to living abroad with your family, we're like, well, I have this job as a nurse. It's a per diem job. It's very flexible. I set my own schedule. It's well paid. And I just started thinking a little bit outside the box. And I remember having this it seemed like a crazy idea. I was like, well, what if I just fly back to California to work from wherever we are? Like, I could conceivably do that. It sounded kind of nuts. I had an infant at the time. I just kind of sat with that for a while and was like, okay, well, if all else fails, we could do that. And over time, I just started, I spent some time on the internet. I looked into all the available options. I looked at living in Germany, how much it would cost. I started figuring all of that out, residency and all of that for us. And I had a chance to look at a Facebook group called World Schoolers. This is a Facebook group full of families who are traveling and they're educating their children as they travel. Taking a look at this group of, I think it was 40,000 members at the time,
wow.
Seeing so many families. Yeah, and not everybody was traveling, but everybody was interested in this idea. And there were a fair number of people that were traveling. And I just realized, wow, people are doing this. People are able to just travel and kind of create whatever life they want at all kinds of income levels. And every question that I've ever had has been answered before. And over time, it just became like another option. And I remember kind of telling my husband about it in the kitchen, just kind of like, hey, there are these people doing this thing. What do you think of that? Just kind of feeling him out. And he was like, that sounds cool. And I was like, I kind of half didn't expect it, but he was on board. And so we just kind of started thinking about how we could spend some time in Germany, where I have family, and we could spend some time in Morocco, where he has family, and really expose our kids to living in other countries and speaking languages that they were already familiar with, but this would give them an opportunity to really be immersed. And then also go visit countries that we hadn't spent a lot of time in, like Portugal, Spain, Croatia, and just, take our time getting to know those cultures and their histories and all of that as well. So I do credit that World Schoolers Facebook group with opening my eyes to a different possibility that I just hadn't otherwise considered.
Let's talk about like timelines and what it took to actually make it happen. So from the point where you actually said, okay, we're going to do this, to actually getting there, how long did that take?
It took about 2 years, I would say, because I'm a planner. And there are people who just like drop everything and go. And I think that's just a personality type, Yeah. I am the personality type that needs to like think through every eventuality, like every worst case scenario. What would I do? How would I like guard against it? And so I really had to do my research about everything. Yeah. So I kind of sat down, and in the evenings after work, that's what I was doing.
What were some of the things that you had to do? Did you work out visas? Did you work out? How did you decide upon like living arrangements and those sorts of things?
So the living arrangements part is actually kind of the easiest when you're traveling, because you can just book. You can book whatever you want. You could book hostels, you could book hotels. We chose to book Airbnbs or VRBOs. So these are, furnished apartments, basically, most of the time with 2 bedrooms. So our kids get 1 bedroom and we get the other. And that worked really well for us. That was easy. The other things that I had to think about were like, what was I going to do about health insurance? Right. What was I going to do about educating my child? How was I going to afford all of this? So the money part of it too, just like getting out all the numbers, figuring out a budget. What did I anticipate things costing? Life insurance for both of us, all of those sort of nitty gritty things that are, part of being an adult and the head of a family,
Right. And did you find most of those resources by talking to other people in the World Schoolers community?
Well, a lot of them were World Schooler. And then I really credit the financial independence community as well, because it was kind of like those two things coming together. It's like, on the one hand, the World Schoolers and learning how to make that happen. And on the other hand, the financial independence community talking about how you don't have to be tied to a job forever, ways that you can set up some freedom for yourself in the future, working toward financial independence, but at the same time, not having to wait until the very end to take back some time and some freedom for yourself. Both of those things kind of came together for us.
Had you already found the financial independence community, or was that kind of like a simultaneous thing?
I think it was simultaneous, but I remember listening to a podcast episode where the host was going through, he was basically going through all these different ways that you could retire early, working part-time, or like living on a smaller budget, or having one spouse working and the other one not. We're just going through all of these. Obviously, there's the traditional, like, reach your number and retire completely. But then there's all these other in-betweens, and that really was like a light bulb going off for me, where I was like, oh, I don't have to be like completely retired to do this. In fact, I don't think I want to be completely retired. And how can I kind of tweak that to make this work for us?
So how has that been, because there's this idea of, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fly back every 2 months and I'm going to work. But then there's the actuality of doing it. How has that adjustment been?
That actually has been just fine. It's not been difficult. I kind of tried to travel plan that every time I had to go back home to work, I would be in like a major, like a capital or something. So I'd be flying from Barcelona, I'd be flying from Zagreb, Tirana, Albania, like some major airport. Like I said, I was working a lot from the get-go, working as a midwife and then working on the weekends in my RN job. So my children were used to, well, my older son was used to me being gone on the weekends. And it just kind of kept going in that vein where sometimes I'm gone, but then I come back again. And even though I'm gone now for 2 weeks, I'm then home with them for 6.
Right.
So it's like, well, they're kind of like a little bit sad when I leave. They're really happy when I come back. And this is a new routine for us. And it's actually worked out pretty well. In terms of like scheduling, it's been easy because my work schedule is kind of set. So I know when I need to be back. And then I just have to I have to book flights. So that's part of my new job. I feel like is a lot of travel planning and looking at flights and trying to figure out what works.
So do you stay like in an Airbnb when you're working as well? Or
Airbnb or with friends. So I still have friends there. So it just depends.
And then how has your husband adjusted to this living situation? Because there's the other side of it, because now he's, a full-time parent for, 2 weeks every 6 weeks. And so how has he adjusted to that?
So he has been the primary caregiver as long as we've had children. So I'm the breadwinner in our family. So I was the one who was always working a lot. So he has a great relationship with the kids, and it's been fine with him. And we always, we're always checking in and seeing like how everybody, when you're doing something like this, you have to check in with everybody in the family, including the kids, to make sure that everybody's still on board, everybody's still enjoying this and like benefiting from it, because it can be difficult. And if it isn't working for one family member, like you need to reassess, right? It's been, honestly, it's been fine for him. Again, it helps that I'm home for 6 weeks, and those 6 weeks I'm there all the time. So before I was working my 40 hours plus.
Do you have any adjustments when you're home for those 6 weeks of like reintegrating back into like the daily routine or anything like that?
I feel like it's our new normal. So it's fine just to come back and be there again. And honestly, that idea of like distance makes the heart grow fonder. Like when I'm gone from my family for a little while, I'm really excited to see them again. Like, you're just like, oh, I love you guys so much. When I get back, I'm so happy to see them. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? I'm looking forward to going to work too. So it can go both ways.
I would have to travel. I just retired my law practice in October, but we live in San Diego and my law practice was in Phoenix. And so like if I would have a trial, I would have to go. I would have to be there for, sometimes a week, sometimes 2. And so it's the same thing. Like I really enjoyed my time away because it was me time and I could do the things that I wanted to do. But also like the same time, I truly missed my family and our routine and my home and my bed. And so yeah, I get that. It's just life.
It is. It's always like the other. It's like when I'm here, I'm like, oh, I wish I had time to myself and like adult communication with my colleagues. And then when I'm there, I'm like, oh, I wish I were with my family.
Right.
But I try to just enjoy what I'm doing in the moment. It's like right now is family time. This is great. And then when I go there, it's like I can really focus on working nonstop. And it's nice too, because I don't normally when I was working, when we were living in California, I often felt like I couldn't maybe work as much as I was being asked to because I needed to be there for my family too. Whereas now when I go back, if I can work overtime, I'll work overtime. I will work as much as I need to just because there are no other demands on my time really. I'm really only there to work. So, and any extra time is me time.
As far as like the financials go, did you make sure that you had any kind of cushion before you went? Were you already, because I think in your bio, you had said that you were coast-fi. Were you coast-fi before you left, or did that happen after you got there?
Yeah, that was before we left. That was part of those 2 years where I was planning. I was like, I want to get to a point. I would feel comfortable if we were at a point where I could just let our investments ride and I don't have to contribute to them. If I can't. Turns out that we were able to continue filling our retirement accounts, but if I couldn't have, it would have been fine. And then in terms of, I did have a cushion. I actually also saved I guess it's sort of an emergency fund that was the equivalent of about a year's worth of expenses that were separate in cash. And then I'm a big fan of the You Need a Budget software. So I use that YNAB I used it for ourselves when we were still living full time in California to get an idea of what I needed, what I was spending month to month. I did that for a full year. So I had a good picture of sort of where our expenses are. And then I was also able, with YNAB, you're able to have multiple budgets. So I was able to set up a separate budget and kind of predict how much I expected things to cost. So some costs remain the same, like our life insurance premium is the same, disability insurance premiums are the same. And then other things go away, like childcare, like all of our expenses related to having a house, 2 cars, all of that just disappeared. So it was able to kind of give me a good sense of what I could expect to spend in a month.
How do you decide where you're going to go next? I mean, do you ever change how long you're going to stay in one place because you just like it so much?
So my children and I actually have dual citizenship with an EU passport. So we could technically stay in the EU area as long as we wanted. My husband has an American passport. So he is required to leave the what's called the Schengen area, which is like an area within the EU. It's like has to do with borders. But he's required to leave that area after 90 days and stay out for 90 days. So there's this whole world of doing what they call the Schengen dance, where you're like 90 days in, 90 days out, and there's there's only a limited number of countries in Europe that are outside of Schengen. That was probably the biggest predictor of where we were going to go. So we spent the first 90 days in Schengen, and that would be Germany and Austria. And then we went to Morocco, where my husband's family is at. That's not in Schengen. So we spent a full 90 days there. And then we re-entered the Schengen area in Portugal and Spain and spent 90 days there, and then had to leave again. So we decided to go to Croatia. Croatia is actually scheduled probably to enter Schengen soon, but right now it's not. Actually ended up spending about 90 days in Croatia and then heading south to Montenegro and to Albania, neither of which are part of the Schengen area either. And again, I'm kind of a planner, so I'm usually planning about 3 months out. I don't think we ended up changing our travel plans too much. Part of the reason is when you book something like an Airbnb for a month, you can usually get a discount, but the caveat is that you usually can't get a refund. So you can't cancel it. There are other things like VRBO tends to be a little bit more flexible. But with Airbnb, it would be a big expense to cancel.
Has the cost of living turned out to be less for you? And does it vary significantly based on where you're going?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it actually ended up being a little bit less. So I think I probably overestimated a little bit to keep a little buffer in there, but it definitely ended up being less than I expected by like maybe 10%. Big differences. Like right now we're in the German Alps. This is a pretty expensive place. Not so much for like things like food, are actually from the grocery store very inexpensive, but housing is pretty expensive here compared to other places we've been. But then prior to being here, we were in Albania, which was super cheap. So like our apartment for a month in Albania was a third of the cost of our apartment in Germany.
Do you mind sharing like what that equates to in dollars?
Yeah, so I think here in Germany, I paid about 1,500 euros, which would probably be around $1,700 or $1,800 for the month. Mm-hmm. But this is like, August in Europe, high season, and we're in like a very beautiful sort of tourist destination. Mm-hmm. So that's why it was pretty expensive. But then in Albania, where we were for a month in July, it was about $550 for the month.
That's typically a 2-bedroom of what you're just so.
Yeah. And actually here in Germany, it's not even a 2-bedroom. It's a 1-bedroom. And my husband and I are sleeping in the living room. But we were here last year and we actually really liked this apartment. So we were like down with doing it again. Mm-hmm. We usually tried to go with 2 bedrooms, but like I said, it's expensive here. And this like $1,700 to $1,800 for the month is like the cheapest thing that I probably saw. So like most places are actually multiples more expensive. Yeah.
So before you left, what did you have to get rid of to prepare to go? Did you have a house that you had to sell, cars, that sort of thing? What did you do with your stuff?
Everything had to go, just basically almost everything. So that was part of the planning, is like you get to like a year out and you're like, okay, what's my like game plan for like selling the house. When are we going to sell the cars? How do you even do that? Like I hadn't sold a car before, so there was a lot. We just had to do a lot of stuff for the first time, but we learned a lot too in the process. But so we got rid of all of our furniture. The only thing I kept were basically like sentimental items, some artwork, just things that I didn't, some things from my kitchen that I didn't want to let go of. And I basically had a couple of friends and family members that let me put like a box in their garage. So I have boxes in various locations in California, but like, that's it. Not a whole lot. Yeah.
So you basically, everything you have are in suitcases? What does that look like? Do you have big, super duper big ones? Or have you learned to...
We started out with really big suitcases. We started out because it was like trying to pare things down. You're just trying to get rid of stuff, get rid of it. But it's really hard to let go of everything. You come to a point where you're like, I don't want to get rid of these things anymore. So we ended up starting with big suitcases, but over time, as we were traveling, it's just really hard to have a lot of stuff. And so I just got kind of ruthless about getting rid of stuff. So like every time I have to pack up, I'm looking at every item and like asking it, like, do I really need you? Because if I don't, or if it's not as useful as I thought, then it's probably time to let go of it. Same thing with clothing and stuff.
So you have little ones. What about things for them? What about like toys and that sort of thing? How do you manage that?
I think they started out with 2 small suitcases and now they're down to 1 small suitcase. And it was interesting because I brought a lot of things that I thought they would enjoy, but then you watch and see what they actually use. And it would be kind of the same things that they're always playing with. Okay, I don't think they actually are playing with the Legos. So I'm going to take those back. And some things I actually bring back to California and store with a friend there and don't just get rid of. But so their stuff kind of got pared down to the things that they really use. And I asked them even today, I was like, do you guys still want this? Like, I don't see you playing with this anymore. Should we leave it here with our cousin and maybe he can play with it? Stuff like that. But honestly, they've been fine with a lot less stuff. I mean, they just like most American kids, they had a ton of toys and a ton of stuff in their room. And now we really just have those things that they really enjoy and no need for all the extras.
How are they adjusting? How are they enjoying this lifestyle?
I think they really love it, honestly. They get to be with us so much and they really like that. And we can kind of plan our days. Basically, we try to plan our days in ways where adults are doing things that they enjoy that also happen to be things that kids enjoy. So usually we try to like line those up a little bit. And the amazing thing is even going to like a playground here can be a beautiful experience because as the kids are playing, you're just like looking at these amazing mountains, like these vistas around you. So like I could have been at a playground somewhere in California, but instead I'm at this like beautiful playground in the German Alps, it's a good thing. They are still young enough that, they go to a playground and they make friends. It's definitely easier when we were places where they spoke the language, like Germany, Austria, Morocco, where they were able to communicate, but they still did fine, even in countries where they didn't speak the language.
And how old are the children?
My older son is 7 and my younger one just turned 4.
How has the schooling been? How has that adjustment been for everybody, for parents and children?
My older son was going to be going into 1st grade. So he finished kindergarten in the States, which was convenient because he already knew how to read. He was already sort of on track with some math, some reading. And that made it easy because I just was able to kind of take it from there. We were fortunate in that he was already ahead of grade level. So I kind of felt like, okay, he'll be fine. Like even if we did nothing, he would still be on grade level. But instead we just, kept building from where he was. So we learned a lot about different resources that are available. There's a ton of stuff that you can access over the internet to help with homeschooling. And so we just did that, from September through June, kind of following a school year. It kind of amazed me how I didn't need to spend a ton of time per day doing this with him because when you're just really focused on what you're doing, and also when you can kind of go at your kids' pace, it doesn't take that much time to keep them on track. So we probably did school maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, usually in the morning, 5-ish days a week. But sometimes we just did it every day. And it worked out well. Like they do some testing in California at the beginning of the school year. And at the end of the school year, we were able to do that for him. And it showed that he was, advancing.
So it sounds like you have family spread out all over. You've got family in the States, but also family in Germany and family in Morocco. One of my questions was, how are they adjusting to not being around friends and family? But it sounds like that really hasn't been an issue because you're seeing those, family members very often.
Yeah. I mean, so part of the reason we were like, we need more freedom. My husband and I were like, we need more freedom. We'd like a little bit more independence, is because especially I was in this like full-time US job where I was getting like 10 or 15 days of PTO a year. And I just never really had enough time to go and see my husband's family. So twice when my older son was like a toddler and a young child, he went back to Morocco with my husband and I stayed home because I didn't really have enough time to go. And that just, at some point you're like, this is no good. I'd like to go with the family. I don't always want to be stuck here working. So that was part of our reason for trying to, create a life with a little bit more freedom. But yeah, so exactly. I hadn't had a chance to spend that much time with my brother and his family here, and neither had my children. So this was a great opportunity for them to get to know their cousins here in Germany, but then also their cousins and extended family in Morocco. It's something that we wouldn't really have been able to do with 1 or 2 full-time jobs.
So it sounds like you're actually getting to spend more time.
Yeah. And the nice thing is my parents have been able to fly out and see us. So like came to Spain, and then I just had them here in Germany as well. So people, and I had my aunt come visit us in Morocco. So people have been taking this opportunity also to come see us wherever we happen to be. And that's been nice too.
What has been your favorite family-friendly destination so far?
We're actually loving the Alps right now because there's a small town close by that's just super family friendly with amazing playgrounds and like all these family hikes that have these educational stations all running along the hike. So as you're hiking down these mountains, the kids are running ahead and learning about X, Y, and Z. They have playgrounds along the hike, and the kids really love that.
Is that Garmisch? Garmisch, is that what you just wrote about that, right?
Yeah, so we're in Garmisch. We're near Garmisch-Partenkirchen right now, but this is actually in Lermoos, which is a small town in Austria, but it's like 20 minutes away. But we also really loved Portugal. Portugal more in like the broader sense of like a really family-friendly culture. Just people were so kind to us and to our kids in a way that, I mean, people generally are friendly to children and families, but it was just noticeable that people were relaxed and like seemed more open and happy about our family. So
that's what I wanted to ask you, because your husband, you said it's from Morocco. So have you experienced any sort of discomfort or anything being a multicultural family?
So, I mean, I think every country has a history that kind of can affect the way different people will see us. For the most part, we haven't had a bad experience. Like in Munich is very multicultural. When you're in big cities, they tend to be multicultural. In places like some parts of Croatia, Montenegro, we would get looks or like stares, but not usually, not hostility, just like curiosity. When we were in Albania, that was also the case, but that's definitely not a very multicultural society, mainly because it was a very closed culture for a long time, like until 1991, Albanians weren't allowed to leave the country. Nobody was allowed to enter. So the idea of having these English-speaking, multiracial families walking down the street is kind of new. So it was a little bit harder for us in Spain. I don't know. Spain has actually, there seems to be a lot of antagonism between Moroccans and the Spanish. And that's like own issue that's specific to Spain. So it makes it so that I probably wouldn't want to live in Spain long term because I wouldn't want my children to feel like their culture wasn't valued. But other than that, it's been great. And Portugal was awesome in that regard. Like we actually felt like it was pretty multicultural, and I feel like the races in general were more integrated there. They have a long-standing ties with Brazil. So actually most people ended up thinking my husband was Brazilian. And just started speaking Portuguese with him.
Right. That's something that I mean, ultimately, we don't know where we're going to land when we hit our fine number, which should be when we're 55. And our youngest children, our 4 youngest children, will be teenagers at that point. And so that is always on my mind. You know, where will my children feel comfortable? And so that's always a consideration. And it's good to hear other people's experiences. Portugal, we're going to Portugal in September. We're going to the Chautauqua.
Oh, awesome.
We're super excited.
Yeah.
But Portugal has been on our radar for a long time. And that's kind of why we took the opportunity to go this Chautauqua, because it just seems like such a beautiful place. And I haven't heard one person say one critical thing about Portugal at all. And so it's cool to hear that that's your experience too.
That's part of why we were thinking of just spending 3 months in Spain. And I kept reading more and more about Portugal. I was like, I think we need to go to this place because like everybody's talking about it. And just like you said, I hadn't heard a bad thing and only good things.
My 2 criteria are it has to have a beach and it has to like be open to my family, my multiracial family. And so I'm like, Portugal.
I think Portugal might like check both those boxes. And you know, the beach reminded me a lot of California. Like it's just very reminiscent of California.
Yeah. Are you a California native?
No, but have been there since after college. So yeah, all of my adult life.
In your heart.
Yes, that's right.
Do you think that this is a permanent thing for you guys, or do you think that at some point you'll land somewhere and stay there?
Well, right now we're actually heading back to Portugal again. And we're looking at potentially staying there for a little bit longer. I think we will continue to travel in the future. I'd really like to go to Southeast Asia, sort of on my list. My son was already like, oh, how's the food there? What's the currency? He's really interested in all different currencies because he's seen so many currencies now. I think for the next year, we might try to kind of stick around one place just so my older son would like a bike. So that's a hard thing to travel with.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Where's it going to go?
So I'm like, exactly. So I'm like, okay, you can have a bike next year.
Aw, that's nice. So we have a family that is maybe interested in following in your footsteps and maybe trying this out. What are some of the things that you think that they would need to do to prepare for it?
Okay. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff, but no, it's like there's a lot to consider, but you just take it one step at a time. So like we were saying, first you want to look at, you know, what kind of passport you have, how long you can stay in different places, where you want to go, and how you can kind of make that work. Probably want to look at some sort of health insurance for yourself or some travel insurance that would cover emergencies while traveling. It depends a lot on whether or not you're keeping insurance in the US, because with travel insurance, usually if, you know, God forbid things are bad enough, they would want to transport you back home to your health insurance at your home. There are health insurance companies that also cover just typical health insurance abroad, and you can choose that as well. I think it's a good idea to get an idea of how much money you spend on a month-to-month basis and how much you anticipate spending. Again, you can travel at all kind of price points. So there's families that travel very cheaply, and they do kind of no frills travel. They don't do a lot of the touristy activities. They're always eating at home from groceries they buy at the grocery store type of thing. Or you can be that family that, you know, wants to hike to the top of every mountain, take every cable car, like do the whitewater rafting expedition or all those things. And those are fun, but that's going to cost a lot more money. So you kind of have to decide where you're going to land. And based on that, you can get an idea of how much money you're going to need. Then you have to figure out how you're going to get that money, right? And everybody does that in a different way.
What did you do about health insurance? Did you buy like a health insurance plan, an international plan?
I actually ended up keeping our insurance in the United States because I was going back frequently enough that I needed something there. I don't want to run the risk that while I'm working, I'm, hospitalized, and that would be extremely expensive in the States. So I just kept insurance there, and then I'm using travel insurance while we're traveling. But if we end up staying somewhere longer, then I would probably just get local insurance.
How does that work then for your children? Let's say they needed to go to the doctor. That's what the travel insurance is for?
Yeah, so it turns out that the travel insurance it'll cover almost anything unexpected. So I'm not taking my children in for a well child visit with it. But for instance, when we were in Spain, my then 3-year-old was on a balance bike and ran into a metal sign on a playground and needed stitches in his forehead.
Poor baby.
Yeah, poor guy. It's one of the hazards of being 3. So he needed stitches in his forehead on a Saturday evening. And so, we had to figure that out. And we did. And we went to a private hospital. He got stitches and the insurance covered that. So that's exactly what it's for. I'm kind of imagining scenarios with your kids that, if somebody breaks a bone, if somebody needs stitches, that kind of thing, travel insurance will take care of that.
Do you just budget to cash pay the well visits and the dental checkups and all that kind of stuff? You just pay that out of pocket?
Yeah. So when we were in Albania, we actually all got cleanings. We all got dental cleanings, and they were $18.
Oh, wow.
A pop.
Oh
yeah. So
gosh.
it's not
that's not less than I had deductible at a lot of places.
Totally. It's not like I had to save a lot in advance. And even when I was in Portugal, I thought I might need a root canal. I didn't end up needing it, but I asked the dentist there, who was, he worked with a lot of expats, a lot of Americans and other foreigners who come, roughly how much I would expect to pay for the root canal and all the required work around that. And he quoted me about 250 euros. So that's,
300?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
He actually
we just paid for a root canal, and I'm that's
right.
10%.
He offered to patch me up so I could get it done in California, and I was like, no, you don't understand. I do not want this done in California. I'd definitely do it here if I need it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Just more reasons.
Nothing abroad is ever as expensive as American healthcare. Even if we had just paid for the stitches at the emergency room at the private hospital out of pocket, it was 180 euros. That's it. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. Are you meeting other expat families?
Yeah, through a lot of the different world schooler groups. They have every week, basically, they're they do a roll call of where everyone's at. And it's a great way to see if there are any other families in your area. And we've actually met a lot of families that way. So that's been a nice way to have some social time for adults and children. And also to spend time with families who know what it's like to be traveling with kids, not just any old adult.
What do you do if you maybe want a date night with your husband? What do you do for childcare? Have you been able to?
Date night with my husband? So when we are places where we have family, if we have family in town, then we'll take advantage of that usually. So or when we had friends in Spain that we were close to, that they took our kids on the occasional date night. But for the most part, we just hang out at home.
I get it.
It's hard. I mean, when you're in a foreign country, to find somebody that you trust to take care of your kids, especially when you're not there for very long, just seems like a better idea to stay in.
Since we are running out of time, I'm going to launch into the final questions if you are ready.
Sure.
All right. What was one money lesson, good or bad, from your childhood that you have carried over into your own FIRE journey?
One of my earliest money memories, honestly, is hearing my mother asking me, as I'm trying to spend my allowance, asking me if I really need that. Do you really need what you're about to buy? And usually, of course, I didn't need the gumball or whatever it was. But I feel like her voice, it's a permanent part of me now, where I'm always do I really need that? And it's kept me from making a lot of purchases that I didn't need to make. But especially now that we're traveling, it's also a very important question to ask, because anything I buy, I'm probably going to have to carry physically from one place to another. So yeah, I've carried that with me for sure.
And what is one money lesson that you would like your children to carry over into their adulthood?
Just the idea that money is a tool that can really provide you with freedom, and being able to manage your money well is probably one of the best or most important skills that you need in life. Someday when they're older, I hope they'll take a look at this life that we're leading right now and realize that it's unusual, that it's unconventional, and that it did take some planning and some deep thought about money to be able to do this.
And then do you have a favorite read, and why is it your favorite?
So I follow a lot of blogs. I read a lot of blogs because, snippets. I have small children. But I really enjoyed Our Next Life is probably my favorite blog. And that's the one that I've started reading that like long before we started this journey. And then I really enjoy the way, I think it's Tanya. I really enjoy the way she writes. So
she does a lot of good stuff and has a really, really cool perspective. I like her perspective a lot.
I do too.
And what is the best way for people to find you if they want to watch you on your journey?
So we just decided, my husband and I finally got it together, and we're going to start a blog. So you can find us at onewayticketfamily.com. And then you can also follow us on Instagram at One Way Ticket Family.
I was just looking at your Instagram pictures, and they are so pretty. Oh my goodness. So pretty.
Thank you. I think from the last year, I have enough pictures that I could just keep going indefinitely.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Just some beautiful, beautiful stuff. Well, what a life you are living, Vicki. I'm purely, envious, but in a good way. Like, I just feel like it's such an inspiration to see other people doing these unconventional, out of the box moves, and that we don't have to settle for the life that everyone else has. We can make choices and do different things and live the life that we want to live. And you just have to be willing to make the choices and the planning. So I appreciate you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, you guys. Oh my gosh. I so wish Kurt was on this call. Like, I totally want to talk with him about this and brainstorm it, because when I said at the beginning of the show, like, they are living the dream life that I would love to have for our family, like, absolutely. And it's just such an inspiration to hear people who are doing it and finding a way to do it. And I just love it. I hope that you all enjoyed her story and her journey, and it encourages you as well. All right. So now for some housekeeping. If you are just beginning on your FI journey, or you just want to do some financial housekeeping, we have a 7-step free email course that is just for you. In that course, we are taking you from the ground floor, what is your why, to setting up a plan for you to get to financial independence, because we believe that financial independence is for everyone, no matter what your background, no matter what your income level, and no matter your debt situation. Financial independence is for everyone, and we are here to support you in your journey. So check that out. You can sign up on the website. The link will be in the show notes. In conjunction with that, we also have our No Nonsense workbook, Shut Up and Budget. And when I say no nonsense, I mean it. It's just, this is what you need to do. No excuses. Just sit down and do it. And then lastly, one of the other things that we have just implemented, it's super awesome, is we have both the workbook and printable downloads on Etsy. These are things that you can print. You can make your own journal, ways to track your debt goals, your savings goals, and just get you on the right track to financial independence. We want to be a support to you. We are here for you, and we want to connect with you. So you can join us on our private Facebook group. That's House of FI, Financial Independence for Families. If you want to click on that on Facebook, I will add you to the group. There's just a couple of questions to get you in. We hope that you have an awesome week, that you were super encouraged by this episode. We would love to hear from you. Leave us a rating or review on iTunes or whatever provider you are listening to this podcast on. Have a great week. Thank you for listening. We're glad you were here.